November has arrived, and that means the weather will be going through some changes across the country. But some of these changes may take a while to occur, since an odd weather pattern will take hold for the first half of the month. Before diving into the long-range forecast, let's take a look at the strange weather pattern we have to start the month. Taking a look now at the current conditions, we really don't have much else going on, except for an atmospheric river making landfall in Washington and Oregon. Even as we push this forward for the next few days, other than relentless rain and mountain snow for the Northwest, we really don't have too much action anywhere else in the continental US. If you're having any doubts about this relatively inactive pattern for much of the country, look no further than the latest 7-day rainfall map. This map reflects this perfectly, as you can clearly spot where the action will be happening versus who is losing out. The Northwest will take the brunt of the weather for the next several days, but mainly just some leftovers for the rest of the North. The southern half of the country will get pretty much nothing. This very zonal weather pattern can be attributed to a persistent high-pressure ridge, which will remain across the western half of the country. This ridge will allow for storms to slide over it into the northwest, with some energy sneaking into the northern plains and eventually the northeast. The ridge will block anything from getting into the south, which will keep things warmer and drier than normal. We can see how this high-pressure ridge will finally back down around November 6th into the 7th before continuing to be pushed away. This will allow for the storm track to maybe sink further south into California after we cross the halfway point of November. And this will of course mean completely different storms for the rest of the country. So now that we know what to expect in the short term, let's take a look at my overall predictions for the entire month of November. We can of course expect wetter than normal conditions across the west and perhaps Florida. The darker green is where I think wetter than normal conditions are likely, and that's centered over the northwest. I did include California in the green just because I think we may see at least a period of stormy weather at some point in the middle to latter half of November. Historically, November is the wettest month in the Northwest, so the fact that we're expecting more precipitation than normal is actually significant. The potential rainfall accumulations across the region over the coming weeks definitely speaks for itself. The areas in the red, purple, and white from Northern California into Washington can expect between 1 and 2 feet of liquid precipitation over the coming weeks. Drier than normal weather is favored from Arkansas into the Great Lakes, with even drier conditions more probable in that darker color. This is quite typical for an El Niño. For temperatures, I think the overall average for the month will be warmer than normal for the southern and western US, with the slightly darker orange having a greater probability of warmer than normal temperatures. I think the most noticeable difference in temperatures will be centered over the Four Corners, especially for the first week or so of November when we have that persistent high pressure in place. On the other hand, cooler than normal weather is possible from the upper Midwest into the Northeast. For severe weather, I think it's going to be pretty non-existent for a good portion of November, since all the precipitation and storm systems will be occurring in places like the northern US, where we really don't have those severe weather ingredients in place. Once we see that pattern change in the middle of November, that's when I think the severe weather and tornado chances will start to increase. Areas in the red from the Central Plains into the East Coast have at least a chance at seeing severe storms, but I personally believe that the darker red shade has the highest probability of seeing severe weather activity this month. Weather models such as the GFS suggest almost no severe weather fuel, also known as convective available potential energy, through the next couple of weeks. But once we get past November 10th, we start to see some more noticeable surges of this thunderstorm fuel into the plains and mid-south, and that's of course due to some of those bigger weather systems developing. So even if November seemingly starts off pretty calm, don't let your guard down. And now for the wintry side of things. This is the CFS model snowfall depth map, and this gives you a general idea of where snow is going to be possible. You can see that as we start November, we really don't see too much snow in many portions of the country except for the Intermountain West. But I think once we pass the middle of November, we're going to start seeing more variability in where snowfall occurs, and that's going to be because the temperatures will be cooling down even more and the storm track will be shifting. My snowstorm outlook here shows where I think the best chance at seeing significant snowfall this month will be. I think we'll see at least flurries or light snow events in other areas such as the interior Northeast, but for the most part, I think areas in the blue will be hot spots for heavy snow this month. We've now reached my overall outlook for November, so let's review it. In the Northwest, we can expect a very wet and stormy November with heavy snow in the mountains. I think this month will be our last chance at seeing some really beneficial precipitation, since the winter will probably be quite dry across this region. California and Nevada can expect a dry start, but I think we may see an active period later this month. The Four Corners can expect a much warmer November with mostly dry conditions to start and even some rain possible later. Northern Plains can expect warmer weather at first, possibly turning much colder and snowier later. The yellow shade is the back and forth zone, with really not a definitive weather pattern throughout the month. The orange across much of the south can expect a very uneventful start before possibly turning wetter and stormier for the middle and latter half of November. Florida may see a slightly less dry November, and then lastly, the upper Midwest into the Northeast can expect colder weather with occasional snow. And that will conclude today's forecast. If you enjoyed this detailed weather breakdown, make sure you subscribe for more updates on all things weather across the US and sometimes Europe.